name's Caroline Henry. Today we are with Brad Baker, and we're going to talk about the Printemps de Champagne because Brad went to the first Printemps de Champagne. So, Brad, tell me, how did you find out about that first Terres in 2009? And, and how, in your opinion, has it grown?
Yeah, so I mean, first, Caroline, thank you very much for having me. Great to see you as well. Great to see you, outside of Champagne too, at least for me. So the first Printemps, I can remember it was either late 2008 or early 2009. So I had been going to Champagne since 2006, and I had been going I started going in the spring to taste the Von Clair in 2007, and just started getting emails from people saying, hey, there's this new thing going on where you can actually taste Von Clair from a number of producers. And I was looking at the producers, and I knew met a number of them, but others I was like, oh my gosh, wait, I can taste Leclepart or Agrapart's going to be here. And, this looks amazing. And it also happened to be at Castel Janssen in IE, which is where I had normally stayed. And so it sounded like something cool. It was, about the same time I normally went. So I said, yeah, I'm going to go to this thing. And at the time, I don't think anybody realized how big it was going to be because there was a line, all the way down Rue Janson in IE for people to get in from all over the world, which I mean shocked all of the growers. They were like, is anybody even going to come? And if anyone here has ever been to Castel Janssen in IE, there's a little courtyard, but it's really not meant to handle more than at most 100 people comfortably, and you've got 300 people waiting to get in at 9 a.m. And I was staying there, so I could walk down and go into the courtyard, and you looked out, and it was amazing. And the workers actually for the first few Terres, it was like the growers' moms, their wives, brothers, sisters. I mean, I think Madame Baresh was checking people in
Yeah.
for that very first one, as she did a few times, and some of the winemakers had, their young kids there with them. And it really just grew very, very organically by word of mouth. There wasn't, posts on social media. It was people just sending emails back and forth. And then, the Couture family who owned Castel Janssen saying, you should come to this thing. And by the way, we're part of it, and it's at our hotel. And like I said, that first one, but to me was, amazing. And, it was very cool because yes, it was crowded, but not that crowded. And you could actually spend time talking to every producer. I remember I had a strategy when I went in. There were, I think at the time, 17 producers probably, and they all had 3 Von Clair and 3 or 4 champagnes. I was going to go through and do everybody's Von Clair, and then come back around and do everybody's champagnes. And I had about 6 hours to do this that I had reserved. And after the first hour, I had to, say I'm not going to be able to get through everything just because there were some crowds. But by 2:30, I was able to get through all the Von Clair, all the champagnes, have a brief conversation, make a few new discoveries, and things that you can't do anymore with the way the setup and everything is. But again, you could see the light in all of the growers' eyes to welcome these international people in. Sometimes now I look at the producers, and sometimes at Terre and the other tastings, it almost seems like it's work for them. Back then, it wasn't. It was fun. It was enjoyable. I still remember it was the first time I got to meet Raphael Beresh and Aurélien Lahert, and say, wow, I love your champagne, I'd love to come visit you. And they're like, yeah, absolutely, come by. When can you come by? Can you come by tomorrow? Things that don't quite happen today. And
Oh,
there were other chef de caves. I mean, Fred Panayotis of Ruinart went to the first Terre as well. You had the CIVC folks were there. There were people from all over that were there to taste and discover things and just talk to friends and other fellow winemakers.
yeah. I remember I went the first time in 2012, because I moved 2011. And I went, that's when I met you, on that bus drive. Who
Yep.
had the most beautiful village? Obviously mine. Okay, everybody agrees on that. So and I remember we went to that place in the vineyard, the place of Jean-Baptiste Geoffroy.
Yes.
And I really, really liked it. And then it became big. It became actually big quite quickly afterwards. There was 2, 3 years that we still stayed at the Hotel Jalisson, and then they moved, and then it just went out of control. But that first year, there was only two groups. The first year I went, so the first year you went, there was only one group, I guess, and then the first year I went, there was also Artisan,
Yes.
and then that was it basically. And then the second year there was Les Mains du Terroir, and then there was more and more. But to me, it's become so commercial. Like you said it's like work now for them, and I think there is part of that. And I think you and me, we are quite lucky if we go because we know the people, so we get served even though there's other people there, if you see what I'm saying. But me, like in 2017, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, it's just too much. I live here, so obviously it's different for me. If you see, I live here, and it's complicated, but I had to book out, so I have to like sell the book.
Right.
But which I'm really bad at those things. But the thing, like, because to me, it lost that magic. So maybe you can say, for you, how did it feel when it grew from Terres to Artisan to Main du Terroir to the 22 groups we've got today?
It might even be 44. I don't even know if everybody knows how many groups there are, these days. So, I think 2012, I don't, 12 to 14 was probably, I think, the peak, maybe 11 to 14. But I remember, you talk about that bus ride out to the vineyards where, we're grilling food and everything else. So, just to also kind of hone in on how everything started really as a family. I didn't make that bus ride because my flight was getting in that Sunday. And,
Okay.
uh, Laura Duque picked me up
Yeah,
and
because you were
drove me
there.
there, and she's like, they won't tell me exactly where to go, but I have the GPS coordinates. And she literally picked me up as soon as I arrived in IE, and drove me there so I could join in. I mean, things that you're probably not going to see or get so much
No.
anymore. But talking about the growth, so you had 2009 and 2010. That's the only year I couldn't come over because the volcano had erupted and all the transatlantic flights
Okay.
were canceled. Pretty much for the whole month of April. And then, as you said, 2011, Artisan came. But I also want to add kind of a footnote. So Bull BO actually started, I believe, in 2010. They weren't part of Printemps, but that group
Yeah.
did their first tasting. So I'm going to honorarily call them the second group that really started
Yeah,
something.
they
Um,
were in October because
yeah,
I went.
even if it wasn't until 2016 that they joined all the spring tastings, but they were there doing their thing as well.
Yeah, they were in October. Yeah, I know. I
Right.
went in 2012 as well to the first review.
Um, so Artisan started, and Artisan, which now of course is at Lake Crier, they started out on the other side of the highway, kind of in
In the
a
boat club.
yeah, like the boating club. Schools could go there, which actually had lots of space and was nice. But again, it wasn't anything fancy. But it was another group of, I would say, grower producers that some of them maybe were a little, I mean, bigger or more well known than some of the Terre globally. So you had people like Vilmar and Margain and Pierre Peters, but there were other folks that I got to meet for the first time there. Like Fred Savar, and Nicholas Maillard, things like that. So another, I would say very very high quality group, fun time. In 2011, and then in 2012, as you said, we had a third group come, and this was the Mines de Terroir at the time, the Terroir Talent, back in the day before they changed their name, and again, this was nice because now you could start on a Sunday in at Bernay with Terroir Talent. And then on Monday, you could go to IE and do Terrevan. And then on Tuesday, you had Artisans, which was in Brahms. One per day. You could spend 5 to 6 hours and then do some normal visits afterward, relaxing, nice. And then we get to 2014, where now we had a couple of more groups joined. You had Origine, which was in PRE, but they were on Saturday and Sunday, I believe, but you could go there on Saturday. And then you had Passion Chardonnay, who joined, and they were Tuesday afternoon, Whenever Artisan ended, they started and went into the evening. So you had at that point 5 events, and you could do them all, but the crowds were starting now to really, really build up. And I think some of the fun started to get lost. And as you got into 2016, things just exploded
Mm.
everywhere to where now you had giant crowds. Excuse me. I can remember people didn't want to spit. You had people falling all over themselves by
Oh, yeah.
noon. Some people started to get maybe a little bit obnoxious. You started to have a lot of parties at night and things like that. Um, and then you also started to, maybe the age of social media came in, and things started to slowly change. I mean, my biggest complaint at the start of, all of these events, especially as they grew, was they're too crowded and there's no spitters and there's no water. So,
Yeah. No water.
you'd
There's
go,
still no water.
it's gotten better. Well, now there's a lot of spitters everywhere. So that
Oh,
problem
yeah.
has been solved. But the biggest one now, and again, I'm not a huge social media person, but to me, it's pictures. Pictures. I mean, I go this year at Terres. There was someone who every time they tasted a wine, they insisted the winemaker pose with the front and the back of the bottle so they could take a picture.
Okay.
And everyone's so nice. Every winemaker did it, but it's very hard for people who are trying to taste if every time you taste you're insisting on a picture of the front and the back of the bottle. And there's a lot of people who, I need a picture of this bottle and this bottle so they can post or something, and it backs things up. And to me, it's not what it's about. It's about, getting some quick tastes on what the previous year was like, maybe making a note on, hey, that wine's a cool discovery, I want to go visit that producer later. It's not about the social media, or most of these producers, they don't need an
We're
importer.
getting old, Brad. That's what it is. But I want to ask, when they take the pictures, I'm sure they take the pictures of the cuvées. They don't take the pictures of the vin clair, I presume.
Yes, you know what, you're exactly right. There are, and
Sorry.
you can also tell, the wine. Some of the winemakers in some of the groups will say, "Well, do you want to try my Von Clair?" And some people will say no, but some are like, "Oh, yeah, sure." I don't know how many people truly like the Von Clair, which really was the point of Printemps when it
Yes.
started. But you are correct. No one's taking pictures of the front and the back of the bottle of the
Well,
Von
there's
Clair.
nothing on the bottle of the vin clair. But but I think that's also, for me, I think the big one was 2016. Terrain at that time was in the Palais des Tours.
Hmm.
Uh, and you know, I felt like I was getting harassed walking in. People were coming to see me because it had become this thing. And obviously, I was selling a book, so I had to kind of be a little bit with the people. But to me, it had become not so much we coming to taste the winemakers, but it was, look, we are here. Let's take pictures, like what you're saying now. Look, so it's not about the wine. It's not about champagne. It's definitely not about the terroir or the year, but it's become, the place to be. So basically, every as the as the events grew, so grew the groupies around it. A little bit like a Woodstock festival, if you want. Like, and
Yeah.
so and so to me, like I remember it was like this. Obviously, in 17, my book was out. I sold it at the Terres event. 18, I barely did any events because my father just died. So I was not, very happy, if you want. I did a few, but I did very little. And then in 19, I went to South Africa because I always thought it was after Easter, and then they did it before Easter. So basically, I was teaching, and I went to South Africa. 2021 was COVID. Uh, 22, actually, I think I stopped going in 18. 22, they did the VSL thing, so I didn't go. I did go in 23, but I burnt my arm, so I saw. And I went in 24, and I really didn't like it because I didn't, I only tried to taste the vin clair,
Hmm.
and I really made it round. I was pushed around by everybody. Uh, it was dark in there, and to me, I was like, no, I don't really want to do it. So basically, this year, if you want, I went to Bulbio, obviously, because I've been to Bulbio every year, okay, since I got here. I did Les Pieds et les Vins because I could do it very early in the morning. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. And I did Chambre Circus, which is very much like Terres was before, but
Right.
it's obviously the red wines. So there's less people coming there. But to me, I think it's a lost opportunity. And obviously, as the sales are dropping, because I noticed the last few years, as the champagne sales are dropping, the pressure's on. You get like I get bombarded with emails. You must do the same, inviting you to all these different things. And to me, it's like I just don't really have the energy to fight the crowds. Actually, no. I went also this year to Apex for the first time, and
Okay.
I realized there was no Vin Clair. I was really surprised. They had all Coteau instead of Vin Clair.
Because people don't want to taste the Von Clair, which is the problem. And I've talked to Terre Von before. Like I've told him, I wish you guys would just go to only Von Clair and see who shows up. Say, and they've said, we'd love to do that, but at that point you'd offend the audience. But that was the beginning. And I mean, if you look at now, there's been changes in a lot of groups. Raphael and Vincent Barash were, they started Terre Von with early in La Herte, and Barash is not
They're
a
not
part of it
doing it now.
anymore.
I know. I think that changed very much. But today, when it started, it wasn't about selling so much as it was about education. And today, I think even in Terrevan, there is an element of, a commercial element. And, it's in Bulbio, it's in all the other things as well. But there's less of this thing. And you see, even, because now there's so many offs as well. So before there was just the event of Terrevan. Uh, then, Bulbio, since their 10th anniversary, they started doing a party, and the party is great, so they still do it.
With the
And
band.
but I realized, like, this year I went to the party, it was fun, but there's so many people that just come to the party to say, look, we're here, and they come to drink free champagne, and then they have to go to the next party or to the next party. But like, if I invite you to a party, I would like you to just come to my party. I don't want you to go to 10 other parties. Okay, it's not the Oscars either here, if you see what I'm saying.
Right.
So it's it's become, to me, it's become a little bit big. And then, obviously the highlight of the event, I think that's the only reason why I do not go away during that time, is the Roederer, actually the Roederer Van Clair tasting more than the dinner. Even though I'm extremely grateful for all the beautiful things they let us taste, I think doing those Van Clair, because I think I've been doing them for 10 or 11 years. I was trying to think as I wrote the thing. Um, and you really, I really have an idea now what these plots are like. You can see the vineyard because, everything's farmed the same, it's farmed organically. You see it develop. And to me, that tasting is amazing. I don't know what you think about it.
I mean, tasting at Rotor is always amazing, and I mean, like you can throw out the dinner and tasting the great wines, but being able to taste the Von Clair across
Mm.
all the villages, you get a great picture, and that is part of what I think is wonderful about going to Champagne and really spending time outside of the Printemps events. Is you can spend time with the winemakers and taste all these Von Clair, whether you're at a larger producer like Roederer, who's kind of more of a large grower than anything else, or a smaller one, like visiting Francois Huret and getting just to taste, some of his plots, and then to understand where those plots are, and
Mhm.
be able to walk through them as you've done with a lot of the Roederer plots and plots of tons of
Yeah,
producers. But
I know the plots. Don't you worry.
when you get to chance to taste, 40 or 50 Von Clair and have your teeth hurt, you get a picture that you can't get anywhere else. Um, and like you, the Von Clair is what excites me. And then getting to taste the blends, as still wines as well, and then getting to come back in 5, 6, 7, 8 years and taste them as released wines and see, okay, were my thoughts at that time right and correct? And I know there's some people out there who say, why taste the Von Clair? You don't know what the champagne's going to be like. And I disagree. I think you get a
No.
very good picture of what champagne is going to be, what's going to be good, what's not going to be good, uh, from tasting those Von Clair. And
Yeah.
sometimes when things are a little bit different, you learn from it. Like I can remember tasting the Von Clair in 2015, or sorry, 2016, but the 2015 wines, the Von Clair was really, really good. And everyone thought 2015 is going to be this knockout vintage. And I can remember Anselm Salo saying something's not right. The growing season was not good. There was too much heat. The vines shut down. Something's going to happen to these wines when they're in bottle. We don't know what, but something will. And end result is some of the wines in 2015 have these herbally green grassy notes that they weren't there in the Von Clair. No one tasted them. They weren't there the first year after bottling. He just kind of came over time. So you learn some things by reflecting back on the Von Clair in the growing season. I think some of that came again in 2020. But to me, it's fascinating. Or 2009. While I wasn't there in April, I was there at the April of 2010 to taste the 2009s. I was there at the end of 2009, and the Von Clair were good, but no one ever thought 2009 was going to be as good as it was. So it's just fun to taste, look back, and learn. And as you said, the Von Clair should be the focus. You can taste champagne anywhere. Go buy a bottle and drink it. You can't taste Von Clair anywhere.
I think that is, when I was looking, to get your profile and stuff, I was reading your little post that you have for free for people. And I was reading your part on the fact that everybody was surprised that you didn't ask for samples and stuff. So, I've never asked for samples, okay? But I remember before, obviously, because I live here, people would come to my house and they would just drink all these wines. They would then say, "Oh, but you get free wine." I was like, "No, I buy it," Uh, so I think that is a big part why people come here is to taste those special things. Because today in the Printemps de Champagne, it's not so much, it started with, I can't remember if it was the Club Trésor, where they had all these old wines that they were doing it. I think basically because they didn't want to put the focus on the Vin Clair, they wanted, a thing being commercial, they wanted to bring all the wines, all the things in there. Today, there's a lot of houses that are doing events there as well. Um, you know, Obviously, I don't know if you go to them, in a lot of people in our group of CRPC, they go, but, I don't go, obviously. But it's, it has become, like a bigger thing. And for me, even, I used to write, I think up to maybe 22, 23, I wrote every year an article for Wine Search on the year before, because obviously I write in harvest and then I would write again. And the last, I think it was maybe from 23, I started writing about the herbicides more. Um, and I think, I didn't write in 24 because, I was in enough trouble as it was. And 24 was a terrible vintage. And Champagne was in a lot of trouble as well. Um, so, obviously, I've mentioned the sorting at tank level many times because I'm for that they do it, but I'm against that they have to do it. With the prices that are paid, they shouldn't have to do this. And especially after 17, when you saw what they picked in 17, and then you saw what they picked in 2023, to me that was just a complete disgrace. And I think it started in those years, like in 18, there was very little Vin Clair to taste. People started bringing out these older bottles, these older things. I remember because I went back to the articles that I wrote, and I saw that I'd spoken about this. Um, and I think that in this scheme, I think it's good that people come to Champagne, but I think that they actually come at a time that they should pay attention to what's happening in the vineyard, especially if they want to taste terroir and everything else. Uh, but they don't. They just come for the parties, to have the party in whatever that street is called in Reims, with the little squares. Uh, then they have the offs everywhere. Everybody's inviting people. I remember at one point I had invitations like for every night, and so I decided to go to nothing because I was like, at some point I need to sleep and I need to write. So when am I going to do that? So to me, this is where I think it went, it lost its potential. And I think also you and maybe Peter uh, are one of the only ones, because AC goes to a few things still, but that you're the only ones that still come from the beginning, because I know a lot of people that came that have stopped coming. And even I did a talk to Tom Houston, who's relatively new, if I can say that, in the Champagne world, maybe 5, 6 years, I guess. He came, and this year he said to me, "Oh, I'm not coming. It's not worth my while. It's easy to taste when not everybody's there. If I need to write, obviously, he comes from England, so it's a different story. But so it's quite interesting that he's having that same impression that I have living here, if you see, and while you still continue to come. So why do you continue to come?"
I think I'm also kind of a creature of habit, and part of me feels like I would offend people if I didn't come, the producers, because I've been there since the beginning. But I do agree, it is hard to taste, and again, I go into it not necessarily. Yes, I take notes, but it's more, can I make a new discovery? And I'll also be honest, you're not going to make a whole lot of new discoveries at any of the Printemps events. You're more likely to make a new discovery just visiting someone or just asking someone for a recommendation. But it still is an excellent way to get a snapshot, and people do organize some nice things around it. Yes, I can taste it, Rotor or all the Von Clair, walk around in the cellars and taste things, but it is nice to again, spend 3 hours with all of us and get other people's thoughts as well. Um, but the crowds are a lot. I don't go to nearly as many events as I would have in the past. I don't spend as much time. A lot of times I do feel tired just because of the crowds and everything else. But there still is, to me, it's a very good opportunity to get a snapshot of the previous year from all over Champagne. And it is sad that some producers don't bring any Von Clair at all. Um, and there's some events I might go in just to see two or three producers because I feel I can get a good view on the previous year from talking to them or tasting
Mm.
with them. But I don't really do the parties, and if I do the parties, I'm there for maybe only an hour and a half or so because again, like you, I have to sleep, I have to write, I have to drive. I stay in IE. Most of the parties and events are in
I
Rhonda,
know.
so it's again you got to go over the mountain. Um, and
Ovillers on the other side of the mountain as well.
Right. And again, it becomes too much about, hey, I want to drink this champagne and that. It's good to celebrate, um, but it's not the same. I will give credit to Terres this year. They did a more of a master class really than a party. The evening before the event, and they structured it to where it started and ended at a certain time. You actually learned something while you were there. I thought that was well done, and reminded me more of the beginning of Terre than what it is now. But again, it's a very small, more exclusive type thing. But I actually thought that was well done this year because again, you had the winemakers going in to talk about climate change and say to show you wines that reflected here's how the climate's changing, to talk about their terroir, the changes overall in Champagne. And that to me brought back some of the soul more than anything else really that I've seen going
Yeah.
on lately.
Yeah, yeah, no, I saw pictures of that event that you said. So, like I I didn't go this year to Terres, so obviously I didn't go to the previous event
Right.
either. But what I saw and what you are saying is very similar to what I loved about that first bus trip, where we actually went to the vineyard. And I remember we went to there was a vineyard of Aurignan that we went to, one of the Beresh, and one of Taran. And so we looked at the different soils, we
Hmm.
tasted the wine. It was, it was really, that was what I really enjoyed. So, it's good that they are going back to that. On the other hand, obviously Tarivan now charges, maybe to keep the crowds out, maybe not. I know it's having bad impact on press. We're not used to paying, if you see what I'm saying. So, but I know, for instance, this is one of the reasons why Antoine is not going anymore, Antoine Gerbel. Um, and it is true. His argument. is solid. He says, well, I can go to Wine Paris and taste for 3 days for free, and here I need to taste, for 50 euros. I only have 2 hours. I need to get around. So that was a bit my thing. Even though last year I didn't pay when I went, but the year that there was a VSL, I paid and I didn't go. So you know I personally do not mind that people want to charge, but I think, at that moment in time, if you offer the masterclass on top, that's great. But if it's just for the 2 hours tasting, it gets very complicated because there's too many people and you physically cannot go around. You want to taste everything. That is just, my view. But, you know, even tastings, Bulbio charged, I think 15 euros or something. I can't remember. I'm a member of the association. So I pay by the year, so I didn't pay for the tasting, so I
Right.
can't exactly what it was. But the tasting was too big. I was there from 9 o'clock in the morning till it closed 5:30 at night, and I tasted maybe, I don't know, 48, I think, producers of the 60, and you know I didn't get around basically, so I was skipping the ones that I knew. If you see what I'm saying,
Yeah.
try to get to the rest, but it's just and I did what I like at Bulbio is the pépinière, so where you have the new people that taste. So I think that is really cool. So I also want to ask you about uh, access to chef de cave because you spoke about that. So that is something, because we have very different, we both write on champagne if you want, but very differently. So this is something that I don't really worry about. Obviously I have access to Jean Baptiste, but I call people if I really need a quote,
Hmm.
but I don't tend to go to different places like that. So I want to get your view. Why do you think it changed? And did it change for the better or for the worse? Because I didn't ask you that in writing.
You know, it, you can say better or worse. So, I mean, I can just start talking about, my first experiences. There really weren't that many people traveling to Champagne, especially to taste Von Clair, in 2006, 2007. So you really could knock on doors, or even directly email, you know, a lot of the wineries or houses directly. And I can remember, wanting to visit Jean Baptiste at Roederer and, or Olivier Krug at Krug, and the first responses you get back are, no, they don't, they're not open for public sessions. And eventually, you email like, look, I really want to visit with them. Let me in. And after a few emails, you bother them so much that I think the French are like, you stupid American, fine, we'll set up a visit for you. And you could get in and talk to them, and they see your passion, and they're like, hey, come back again, let's taste Von Clair and things like that. Where today, if I were to start going over to Champagne now, I'm not sure anybody would let me in. It's much more, I think, about, okay, how are you going to promote my wine? How much are you going to be able to influence me? And I've even seen, a number of producers, I used to visit a lot 15, 16 years ago, where the access has changed because I'm not a social media guy. I'm not an influencer per se. And it's more of a, well,
Oh,
what are
yeah.
you going to do for me? Or, I mean, I'll be honest, I can remember walking into a number of growers and say, hey, I want to buy a bunch of, magnums or bottles. And they'd say, what do you want? How much do you want? And it was dirt cheap. And you can't do anything like that anymore.
You cannot.
I mean, in fact,
No.
there's been some growers who have cut off, allocations to longtime buyers because they said, you know what, it's not worth anymore to just reserve 2 cases for you. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do a bunch of big stuff to restaurants or something else.
Yeah.
So it's just it's changed. It's business, especially at the larger houses, to where you can't just knock on the door and say, "Hey, I'd like to meet you," and talk about champagne and wine and the Von Clair and the Terroir, and things like that. I mean, even at Rotor, we have a great dinner. I love it. It's a great event, but I still enjoy more 8 a.m. walkarounds for 2.5 hours, going through the barrels and tanks, and tasting the leaves and things like that. To me, that's
No, I
still
know.
the
But
exciting thing.
he used to do this because we used to go. Sophie and I used to go. You went separately, maybe with Peter or whatever. So he used to do all these different people, and I think now he does less. some people seem to get more access or ask more access. I think, with Roadrunner, for instance, we have that. But I even noticed what you are saying. I was literally 2 years ago, I think, uh, they refused me at Artisan because I basically registered late. And, I remembered. So none of these artisan growers will ever be in Wine Search, okay? You think Wine Search is not press? You know, I don't care, okay? You can think whatever you want, but you will not come there. And before, they did ask me to go because they all wanted me to write about them. So that's what I was saying. It's all about promotion. To me, Les Pieds et les Vins is not like that. Terres, even though I didn't go this year, to me, it's never been like that. And I don't think it is like that. Bulbio is not like that. Obviously, I write a lot about organic. But, like I said, I went with other people. They paid to get in. The only reason I didn't pay is literally because I'm a member of the association. Pay 150 euros every year, to support the association. Because, obviously it's up my street. But otherwise, it isn't like this. What I did notice is, so I have not much access anymore because a lot of winemakers changed and, because I
Mhm.
never followed up. But I did notice, I wrote a post here actually, because I did write on LVMH on the living soil and regenerative viticulture, because obviously they're doing stuff around us. And then I wrote something here on Substack, and I got contacted by the PR, or actually by somebody in LVMH, giving me all the different PRs for all the brands because I had said that I had no access. So I do, I am going to contact them because I do really want to go see that big vineyard, with somebody because I've been in it in Sillery, but I went alone. For instance, I took the girl from regenerative organic there. We just stopped by car. We didn't see anyone. But I would like to visit it. So, but that I think is not because I'm here, is again because I write for Wine Searcher, and they kind of realize that after 14 years, I ain't going anywhere, if you see what I'm saying. So that but to me it's quite shocking actually that growers now become like this. And I don't know, houses, I think you go via the PR, and if you are influencer or if you have readership, because you have readership, you have early readership, a newsletter, you could say Parker started the way you started, so it may become very big, Brad, before you know. So I think it's I think when you tell them about the readership and the things, you would get access, but you need to sell yourself, which I think you didn't need to do before.
I would agree. I mean, it's much more crowded now. I mean, again, when I got into Champagne in the late '90s, you pretty much had Tom Stevenson, who had a book out there, and that was pretty much it. There wasn't anybody.
There was Michael Edwards. He lived in Champagne for a while.
Right, but in the
Very
United States,
English. Very
yeah, he
English.
wasn't. I mean, you could maybe. I think Michael was probably writing for Decanter, and I love Michael. Michael used to come to some of the early Printemps events
He's in
as
a
well.
retirement home now, Michael. So
Yeah, a great guy. He
he's the
also
one that he's the one that got me to champagne. His love of champagne is what inspired me. That's why I asked him to write because he wrote the preface of my book, and Tyson as well. But that's why I asked Michael, because I have a lot of respect for him. And I knew him differently because we were in a circle of wine writers together for a while. Until I'm not in any of those things anymore. But yeah, I know it was a lot less. I think when I came, there was obviously, there was Tom Stevenson that was still in the picture. Essie was coming up. There was Peter, obviously, and everybody was talking about you. I remember they spoke about me. They spoke about you, and they said, "Oh, the guy with the blue shirt. He's got a big website."
now
So
no one speaks about me anymore. Now they all speak about you. But I mean, going back, I just want to say a few
no,
more.
they don't speak about me. They don't like me already.
But I mean, Michael Edwards actually out of the blue, I want to say probably in 2010 9 or 10 just reached out to me and said, I'm really impressed by your writings, your tastings. I encourage you to continue. I'd love to meet you. And so we struck up a friendship. And I don't think I've seen him since 2018 or 19. And I can't remember the last time we, just did an email chat. But what a great guy, always positive, encouraging the next
Mm.
generation. And we need more people like that. I mean, Michael kind of said, look, he's like, I'm not saying I'm this great guy, but I kind of have to hand off the baton to the next generation. And I want to make sure that the right people are there who have the right love, who have the right passion, and do the right thing.
No, Michael really is like that. Actually, because through the Circle of Wine Writers, I found out that he's in a retirement home. So I sent him a Christmas card actually this year, because like I said, I always like he always encouraged me when a lot of people were not encouraging me, because I've chosen a path which isn't the easiest path to talk about champagne. And I think when Jean Baptiste, when he was very nice to me at the dinner, that really touched me, because it's true, it's not always easy. I've never done it to be easy. I think I've never really been a wine writer. I've always been a journalist. Okay, I come from a research background. It's I can't just accept everything people tell me. I need to dig more. That's just I think we're all different in a way as well. Um, but and also my love of champagne. There was Marco, but before that, obviously I had champagne as I grew up. I was not impressed with it. You know, I remember working for the art festival in Brussels, that they gave us champagne, that we were selling it. We didn't want to drink it. Okay, it was, I can't remember if it was Clico or what. We're like, we would drink anything in those days, but it wasn't my thing. But I got into the passion of sparkling wine in New Zealand by friends of mine at Johanneshof. It was a very small production, a bit like growers here. We
Mm-hmm.
did everything by hand. And so I helped them and I really got into it. And then speaking to Michael, that got me into it. And then Michael told me, because I was on garden leave, I couldn't do anything. And he said, well, if you want to understand champagne, just go there. You speak French, you can go, you can understand it. So I came for 6 months, so 14 and a half years now later, I'm still here, um, he is, a stellar guy. And people, I think there's people that have taken over from him. Like, Tyson still brings those books out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Tyson's a good writer. He's very diligent. I do believe that there are people that want to read what these different winemakers say and do. But, I think eventually, I believe, that's why I stopped doing all different wine studies as well. Is, at the end of the day, to me, it's like, does it bring me joy or not? If it doesn't bring me joy, like, I'm too old now. I'm moving over to the rest. So I don't know. So where do you see, to finish, where do you see the Printemps going from here? Can it get any bigger, or have we reached the peak, you think?
I always thought there was going to be consolidation, amongst the groups. I mean, I can even
I hope
remember
not.
when,
Imagine how bad it would be.
well, I mean, I can even remember when Mines de Terroir or Terroir and Talent started, people were saying, this group has got some people that aren't worthy of being in a group. And this is when there
Mm.
was only three groups. Um, and
I
I'll
remember that.
also, be honest, I try to attend at least one or two different tastings each printemps that maybe I haven't done in 5 or 6 years. And this year, I went to the Saisonnet tasting, and it was interesting because I hadn't gone in a number of years. That the people who originally founded that aren't members anymore. Like more than half the producers have turned over,
Yeah.
um, and I didn't know who a lot of them are, so it's good to get to taste them. But part of me says, yeah, I think there probably are too many groups, but every time I say that, a new one pops up. So it must be productive for everybody. I don't see it stopping. I think more and more you're going to get larger producers, houses doing events around it. Last few years, you've already been seeing it because everyone's in Champagne. And then they're going to schedule over other things. So this year was smaller than previous years. I think the number of people going is going to decrease a little. I think they'll continue it because it brings business. You talked about the big party. The for the first time ever, I actually walked the street outside of Sacre Burger there while the crowds are there because I don't go to those things either. And it took me like 10 minutes just to walk like 5 feet. There's so many people, so it's bringing business, to the restaurants, the shops. So it's good from a tourism perspective. But I think we've got to be honest. This is now a tourism event. It's not about champagne. It's not about Von Claire. It's at this point about tourism and promotion. There is some love there, but it's not how it
No,
started.
it's a like it's a business event, like you're saying. And yes, obviously for me, when you talk about tourists, living in Ovile, where we are swamped, like it's not, I think we would have had it earlier if we wouldn't have had, the terrorist attacks and COVID. But, now we are in full UNESCO bloom for the 10 years. And the tourists, like Saturday today, you want to go to the bakery, you wait 20 minutes. Okay. It's like things it's like visiting Venice, basically. This is what it's become. Yeah. So, to me, we do not need more tourists. Okay. We have plenty. We don't need any more. But it's true. But that's what I'm saying is it's become an influencer event. And I am wondering because obviously everybody wants to be influencers, and I don't think I'm an influencer. I never thought of you as an influencer. As
You
I
are an
thought of you
influencer.
as somebody with a lot of knowledge, but not necessarily as being on these social media all the time. And I'm thinking, who's buying the wine? Because Generation Z is not drinking anymore. And what I see as well is that they are drinking, when they are drinking, they are not drinking champagne. They are drinking Prosecco. They are drinking other things, where even Tom was speaking about this. And I am wondering, yes, a lot of it is, it's free business. Okay, I'm a big TikTok star. Who's going to give me the biggest freebie so I can go and take videos of myself, which in the end is not bringing anything in for the growers, for the people, the houses, everybody doing it. So, I don't know how long this will last because it's not, to me, it's not a solid business proposition either. I may be wrong, but um, this is what I'm saying, because yes, it's good to have people on social media posting about your party and stuff, but what does that do? How much will you sell on top of it? How much credibility will you have? Because a lot of the people, or the older people, from the original groups, they make stellar wines. You spoke Les Mains du Terroir. You have people like Terres there. The wine is serious. And it's going from strength to strength. Jean-Pierre Vazard, you have people that were there from the beginning, and they make really, really great wine. You have in Les Artisans, obviously, you have Savard that you mentioned. You have the Paillard brothers that make good wine. I love Christophe Mignon. You have the huge stars like Rodolphe Peters. You know, so there are these different things, but I don't know. Peters apparently has sold to, I can't remember if it's Dior or one of these groups. So it's become crazier as it was. So I you know I don't think that the groups will consolidate because I can't imagine them doing it. I don't know, finding a space big enough. They can't really go to what is that place called? There's a outside of Reims where they do the foire à vin.
Yeah.
They wouldn't go there because it's not fancy enough. So you have no space to put everybody, all the producers in. Never mind all the people that visit. So
Well, I would see maybe some groups just disappearing. Like, okay, is it really worth the time and the effort? Is it increasing your sales? Or, I would love to ask some of the producers because there's hundreds now that go what their goal of Printemps is. Is it just to be? Is it to be seen? Just because a lot of these producers are going to sell regardless. Some of them, but there are some unknowns who you can walk around and there's not a lot of people tasting, and I'm not sure always what the goal of some of these groups are. I mean, you have some groups, and I love Pierre Devin. You got a bunch of small
Yeah,
producers. I don't
that's a
think
fact.
any of them make
But
more than
they
10 or
are stars as
15.
well now.
Right, and they don't have any wine to sell. They don't really make much, and they're there for the right reason to see people, folks, just have a taste. 'Cause a lot of times it's hard to find a bottle to taste. And some of the other more well-known folks, they're going to always be able to sell their wine. The top
Yeah.
of the top's always going to sell. You talked about people are drinking prosecco or not drinking it all, or just drinking sparkling water. It is going to hurt the people that aren't in that very, very top 1%. And Champagne does have, I think, a little bit of an image promotion problem. And I say you're an influencer because I don't know if you know this or not, but you know how many people post pictures of two vineyards side by side, one green and one brown? And you started that, and I see it all the time now where people say, "What's wrong with this vineyard?" And so that's why you
Oh my
influenced that
God.
whole thing.
You make my day telling me this. Because yeah, obviously, I've been going on about this, but I didn't realize that so many people do it now. Obviously, I know that I'm known for being against herbicides, but I didn't realize that people are doing it. But I know this is hurting because I teach. I teach. I don't know if I'll continue for a longer time doing that, but I do know that this is something that people are worried about, the younger generations. And I think also, I actually don't think that the top ones will hurt. It's everybody else that will hurt. I think what people are not buying is Brut Sans Année, so it's the non-vintage. It's not the top wines. The top wines are selling, and I think yes, champagne has that image, but today it's not just. I don't know, Moet and Chandon. I need now Dom Perignon, and or I need you know Rodre Collection, I need Cristal. And I think what you see as well, those houses, they are working significantly on the quality of those wines. Living in Ouville, I've seen the way Moet changed their vineyard practices. We know Rodres, but I've seen it. So for the good, let me just say. So I think that those things stay, but at the end, all the other, you know the other people, I don't know, some people, I know you spoke, people go away because they think maybe they don't get it. I spoke to Delphine because I didn't know when she left Terres, and I asked her something to do with Terres, and she told me, no, I left Terres because it became too commercial. That is what Dominique told me as well. um, I never asked Benoit Layette, but you know, there are things. Franck Pascal said, he felt he wasn't on the same wavelength anymore. Um, so, you know, different people do different things. I think it's normal that you see turnaround in the groups because, uh, for instance, in Terrevin, you spoke about Agrapar. Today, it's not Pascal anymore; it's Ambroise. So, you will see more and more of that happening. But I don't really know where the story is. I think yes, the Printemps will continue, but it may be become something like, I don't know, the Imprimeur in Bordeaux, where everybody goes to the big houses for the big dinners, and then everybody else does their thing, and you just take pictures and you do your stuff. But more and more people, what I know is importers, things, they don't come anymore because they don't want to fight the crowds, which I can
Yeah,
understand. If you come really for business, that's not what you want to do. I was quite shocked about Tom. I understand perfectly because he was saying what I think, but I was quite shocked to hear it that he said, no, I it's holiday. Obviously, he's got kids. Like I said, I perfectly understand his reason, but it made me see that, it made me realize that the printemps is not this big thing anymore. and maybe even, even though for you and me, Terres obviously is the soul of this, I think for a lot of people it isn't because they moved back to Epernay. I'm not sure how many people are traveling.
Yeah, I mean, I wish honestly it was more spread out. I understand with so many groups why it isn't anymore. But I mean, again, if you go back to the beginning of the Printemps, it wasn't Printemps back then. It was just Terres. It wasn't about being commercial or getting critics or people to review. It was about let's explain to you our Von Clair, and yeah, there'll be some champagne as well. And normally it was the Von Clair and the champagne they matched, so you could taste the Von Clair and then the current release, from what that Von Clair was in previous years. It was never about trying to find an importer or making sales. That wasn't the start of it. And I agree, maybe it has become more about that, and I understand people who don't want to come and deal with the masses. Antonio Goloni, he never came to any of these events. A lot of folks did. I mean, I was shocked that a couple times now I've seen Richard Julin, there as well. Going around tasting. It's not a conducive environment if you're trying to take serious notes. You need to do that one on one. And I'll tell you, the highlight actually of my trip this year was feeding Alexandre Charton's animals at his, I call it the Murphy Zoo. Uh,
Yeah.
and I've told him, I said, can I just stop by here whenever when I need a break? And he's like, yeah, just come by whenever. It's the most relaxing area to just go and just feed the goats and the sheep and everything else for an hour,
Yeah.
not drinking champagne, just talking to Alexander, just talking to the animals. Actually, was probably my highlight because it was just relaxing in nature.
But welcome to my world, Brad. For somebody who lives here, I can tell you that week is mad. We are going to have to wrap up because my phone is going to crash soon. But because I don't have very much battery, I have an old phone, and because we struggled getting, because I kept on putting the wrong Brad Bird. I'm terrible like that. But before we go, do you have any closing remarks, things that you would like to say? Maybe there's a few of these growers that are subscribers, so maybe they will watch. Is there anything you want to tell them on the Printemps, what you would like to see changed or what you don't want to see changed?
The open access, I hope, doesn't change. You talked about the charge at Terres, and we could talk for hours. That's also a touchy subject there, so I don't want to get into that. Keep the access up, but again, I would say go back to more de Von Clair. You can
Hmm.
taste champagne anywhere,
Yeah.
and I think I don't want to say you get rid of the people who don't really love champagne because if you're in champagne, you're supporting things. But
You're going to be in the naughty club with me there,
oh,
Brad.
I'm already in the naughty club. It's okay. The focus really should be on the Von Clair and understanding the previous year where things came from. Get back to more of the education. That's how it started. Was really
Yeah.
about education, knowledge, and discovery. I wish it went back to that. I don't think it's going to. But again, I like the open access. Everybody can taste. It's open to everybody, but I wish there was a little more soul in education. I don't like seeing some of the growers just down, just pouring.
Mm.
Uh, and for people, again, it shouldn't be about stars. I noticed this year at Terre. So you mentioned Agripar. Ambrose was pouring this year. Pascal was there, and people. The table was actually fairly empty. Normally, there's a huge crowd around Agripar because I don't think people recognized Ambrose. So I'm like, okay, are you here for what reason? These wines are great, but because Pascal's not standing there, you're not going to go to this table. It was weird. It was odd. Getting off on a tangent, but closing remarks again. I again, everybody should go taste some Montclair. You have to me, understand the origins.
Yeah.
You got to understand 1 + 1 = 2 before you get into algebra or anything else. And I
Mhm.
walk the vineyards, go out there and walk the vineyards, understand where your wine came from, and then you start to understand why some wines are better than others. Uh,
Yes.
that it's not about the parties. Get up early, take a walk. Take a walk in the evening, get to know the land, taste the Von Clair, get to know the real champagne, not just the partying and disgorging on the streets and everything else.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. I would maybe, if I can add something, bring the tastings back to the vineyard. Like back here. It used to be an AE, not because I live here, but it's difficult to walk to vineyards in a house. There are some, but they're outside. So I think it's true that when you bring the people back to the land and you make them understand what was behind it, I think they will be better ambassadors for Champagne. And, the Printemps for me is very important, even though I don't go to many things. But it's that inspired me to write my first book. So, it had a big impact on me, and I want to see more like what you say, education. I'm really happy that you told me about this masterclass of Terres because I think that really is great.
You would have enjoyed it. It's the one thing I'd say you would have actually enjoyed.
Well, I know for next year. Thank you. So yeah, so it's I think that is the thing, the message indeed is that, go back to where it came from, because to understand champagne, I think the the analogy you gave me of 1 plus 1, do that first before you go into the big formulas. And I think, yeah, that's it. So thank you so very much, Brad, for all your time. Are these bottles behind you? I've been staring at this the whole
Yeah, so I like to do any of my video stuff. I sit in my cellar. It's a little cold, so I'm actually shivering a little bit. But yeah, so I'm sitting in my cellar that is, I don't know, 99% probably champagne. No prosecco. Don't worry, no prosecco in the cellar.
I have no, I have never liked Prosecco because I don't like Glera. So it's not that I don't like, I like Cofando I can drink, but I don't like the grape Glera. So I've never been a fan of Prosecco. And, at the moment, like I said, I'm still in Champagne, I'm going strong here, for better or for worse. I've done better in my marriage to champagne than in my marriage to my ex-husband. So for what it's worth.
Well, I mean, that's how I got into champagne. It really was in college to impress girls, and then I found out I think I like the champagne better than the girls I'm dating. Not my wife, but at the time, I was like, yeah, I'm
Be
more into
careful
learning about
what
the
you
champagne
say.
here than
I
talking
do
to you.
not want to be I do not want to be responsible for any divorces. Okay. All right. Well, great talking to you, Brad. I hope to see you when you come to Champagne in autumn.
Yes,
Um,
will definitely we'll have some time for a coffee. So I know you know all
the
the
place
places.
is renewing. They changed ownership, so
That's what
they
I
are
heard.
doing it up.
But
But
we're
otherwise,
on the
you
streets
have
in IE or
coffee.
the
I'm
streets of
going
Obele. Yeah,
to. Okay, and you can feed my dog or pet it if she's
there you
getting
go.
very antsy. She wants to go out. All right. Thank
All right,
you.
thank you. Great to see you.
Lovely to see you. Thank you, everybody,
All right,
for
keep up all the
watching.
hard
Thank
work.
you very
Thanks,
much to the
Caroline.
great
Bye.
Brad. Bye bye.